Walt Morey is the kind of author who makes you want to hop on a dog sled and head for the mountains, who makes survival in the wild sound like a fascinating adventure, and who can make anyone wish they had a wild pony, or a wolf, or a giant brown bear for a friend. He's written 17 books for children, and some for adults, almost all of them featuring humans and animals and the great wilderness spaces of the northwestern United States. And as is often the case with our favorite authors, these great stories grew out of personal experiences and a love of reading other great authors. Walter Morey was born in 1907 in Hoquiam, Washington, and grew up moving around the Pacific Northwest as his father sought work, from the coast of Washington and the Willamette Valley in Oregon to the rivers and mountains of Montana. He loved all things outside, nature, and adventure. But he didn't love school. He had to go through first grade 3 times, and said he sort of backed out the schoolhouse door when it was time to graduate. They gave me a diploma either out of sympathy or that they had an extra one lying around, he said. So by his own admission, he wasn't a great student. But one thing he began to love in high school was reading. A short book given to him by a friend opened the floodgates to his imagination, as great books tend to do, and he became a voracious reader. Then one day when he was about 20, Walt read a book by the great Western author Zane Grey, a book whose ending he didn't like, and so he decided to write his own. Ending, that is. And from then on, he was hooked on writing, even though his first works were void of punctuation and full of grammatical errors. By sheer determination, and the encouragement of a librarian friend named Rosalind, he taught himself to correct his own writing, rewriting thousands and thousands of words over and over as he analyzed published stories to discover on his own the rules of writing mechanics. And all the while he was earning a living, working in woods, factories, sawmills, and shipyards. A strong man with an even stronger work ethic, he was employed in a veneer plant, a paintbrush factory, and for a time he was a champion boxer, winning over 30 bouts in the ring. For a while he even worked in theater security, keeping tough gangs of teens from making trouble on the sidewalk outside. And what do you think all these adventures were great for? That's right, they provided rich material for the stories he would one day write. His first tale was published in 1937, a boxing story he sold to Knockout magazine. And after that, well, he was on his way. For the next 15 years, Walt wrote stories about the old Wild West, deep-sea diving, and logging adventures, as well as the sport of boxing, or what were called pulp magazines. These were magazines made on cheap paper with poor printing that were full of sensational stories by low-paid writers. Writers like Walt, who made a penny a word for their work. But when the television appeared on the scene in the 1950s, demand for Walt's kind of adventure story sort of dried up. Kids were all too ready to sit down in front of the box and be entertained by moving characters and on-screen horses. And the pulp magazine fell to the wayside, which was too bad. By now, Walt had added a summer of underwater dive rescue and ship repair in Alaska to his many adventures. But there was no market for his stories. Discouraged, Walt took a break from writing, focusing on growing filbert nuts on his farm in Sherwood and working as a shipbuilding foreman. But after 10 years, his friends, and Rosalind, who was now his wife, were finally able to convince him to get back to his old Remington typewriter. Gentle Ben, the story of a bear and a boy, was published in 1956 to great acclaim. It sold nearly 3 million copies and was turned into both a movie and a TV series in the 1960s. Now, Walt was officially a writer of juvenile fiction, inspired by writers like Wilson Rawls and Jack London. Usually, these books featured the relationships between a boy and an animal. For the last 15 years of his life, Walt Morey spent much of his time in schools and libraries as a special speaker, encouraging young people to read. He has a middle school named after him, as well as a library reading room. And in a suburb and park where his filbert orchard once grew, stands an 8-foot-tall, life-sized wooden statue of that beloved fictional bear, Gentle Ben. His final book, perhaps ironically titled Death Walk, appeared just 7 months before he passed away from a heart attack at his home in 1992. Thank you, Walt Morey, for creating such wonderful stories of survival, self-discovery, and determination, and for reminding us that the wild places and creatures of the earth are not only beautiful, but deserve our protection